Bernie Sanders, and I'm here to tell you all how we're going to win. So we've only got 14 days left until the caucuses. That's only 2 weeks, y'all. So let's get right into it. We're going up against some pretty serious forces. Millionaires and billionaires who have rigged the economy and government to work for them and not for us. That means that it's going to take all of us. Knocking on doors, making phone calls, talking to people we know and talking to people we don't know. And that's exactly what we've been doing. So far, we've knocked on over 400,000 doors. We've made over 6 million voter contact attempts in this state alone. We're gonna win the caucuses here in Iowa. But it's not gonna happen overnight. It's going to take making a choice, committing to putting it all on the line to create a political revolution. So I want to ask you all, right now, text commit to 67760 to commit to caucusing for Bernie Sanders on February 3rd. Next, one of the best ways that you can help Bernie get elected is signing up to be a caucus volunteer. This means that you will lead the Bernie team on caucus night. So text caucus to 67760 to sign up to be a caucus volunteer. Repeat it. It's 67760. Make sure that you sign up with one of the organizers with the shifting sheet right now. We need everybody out there knocking on doors and making phone calls. We're asking everyone to sign up for at least 4 shifts from now until the caucus. You guys, we only have 14 days left to make history. And I have no doubt that if we organize, talk to people we know and the people that we don't, and fight like hell, we're going to win. So let's make it happen, Iowa. Thank you all so much, and I look forward to seeing you all out there. Thank you, guys.
Hey, how's everybody? Testing. Hello, how's everybody doing? Awesome, thanks for coming out. We are Iowa Tough. We show up when it's cold, we show up when it's hot, right? I'm Misty Rebick. I'm the Iowa State Director for Bernie 2020. We have been doing this damn thing for about 9 months here in the state. I believe we have one of the strongest operations in the state, and it's because of you. So give yourselves a round of applause. But I am so excited to be here with some of the best leaders of our time here in the state of Iowa, and on such an important day. Today we gather to recognize the legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., the fight that he led for racial and economic justice. And in the year 2020, 52 years after Dr. King's passing, we must ask ourselves, what is it going to take to see his vision of equity and justice through? There's a lot of famous quotes by Dr. King. One of my favorites is, "Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere." Dr. King's vision was rooted in deep solidarity and in the fight for communities that were beyond his own. In that same spirit of solidarity, we ask the question today, are you willing to fight for someone you don't know? Today, I'm proud to be joined here on the stage with our 6 Iowa State co-chairs that represent the multi-generational, the multiracial coalition of people who are willing to fight for people they do not know. And they have joined the Bernie 2020 campaign because they know this is the time to do it. So let's get right into it. Deanna, you are the youngest person to ever serve on the Des Moines School Board. You have been a rock-steady progressive advocate, and we are proud to welcome you as the newest Bernie 2020 state co-chair. Please give Deanna a round of applause. Deanna, you just finished your term on the school board here, and I know there must have been some difficult time in that work. Resource gaps between communities are so ingrained in our system. What do you think it's going to take to finally change that? And how did that lead you to believe that Bernie is the best person to help get that done?
Well, for starters, this is such a dope crowd on Dr. King's Day. Was not expecting to walk into this, so thank you all for coming. For starters, I guess there are so many different, when we talk about communities and resource gaps, I think that is very broad language, because when we know we're talking about resource gaps in particular communities, we're talking about communities that have been oppressed. We're talking about Black folks, we're talking about brown folks, we're talking about LGBTQ folks, we're talking about poor folks and working class folks. So I just want to start there. I think my lens that I see a lot of this work through is education, so I can speak specifically to that. I don't think these resource gaps that are affecting our kids just came to be. Oftentimes, they were the result of very deliberate decisions by adults in positions of power in our local government systems, from the federal government, concentrating our kids, poor kids, Black kids, brown kids, into communities where they don't have the resources, and underfunding our schools so our kids don't have the opportunity to thrive, where a kid and the education they get is dependent on their zip code and not, not something substantive. So I think that it starts with us actually demanding something different. I think it's one thing to say that we didn't make those decisions, but at some point you're complicit. When you look at your neighborhood school, right, and maybe it's a school that isn't performing well, do you choose to invest in your neighborhood school and send your child there, or do you go somewhere else? And so I think it starts with us demanding something different. And you mentioned, Misty, caring about someone that you don't know. And I think it's really easy, even for us liberal, progressive folks, sometimes we can talk the talk and it's a lot harder to walk the walk. And I think that we have to really start caring about, if we're talking about education and children, other people's kids as much as we care about our own, and start sacrificing for other people's children as much as we would sacrifice for our own. But I think that change is going to happen when we, as a community, really stand up to demand something different. And for me personally, when I look at Senator Sanders, that's what this entire movement is about. I mean, it sounds cliche and corny and we keep saying it, but this slogan, not me, us, is really true.
That's right.
Like, the power really resides with each of us in our communities to demand something different. And I think when enough of us come together and begin to demand something different in our schools, in our cities, in our nation, things will change. They have no, people in positions of power have no choice but to respond to people power. So.
All right. All right, thank you, Deanna. Let's move now to Representative Jeff Kurtz. You're the state representative from your hometown, Fort Madison, down in the most southeastern point in our state, a proud member of the Brotherhood of Locomotive Engineers and Trailmen. So give it up for Jeff. Representative, I think we all understand the importance of working class solidarity to progress. But a lot of people in our movement have never had the chance to sign a union card. So could you share a story with us from your union days and about how joining a union can quite literally change your life and your life's perspective?
Thank you. Thank you, yeah. Thank you, Misty. In fact, the one thing that comes to mind is the very last thing that I had to handle as a union officer before I retired from the railroad. And it was an incident that happened in Mason City, Iowa. And, well, it was the local in Mason City. One of the workers was working on a train, and they were switching a factory. He was knocked off the car. He was run over. In fact, the car had rested on his ankle. A 130-ton car rested on his ankle for 45 minutes. The engineer was afraid to move because he didn't want this guy to bleed to death. So we came together as a union. At the time, I was the head of our legislative and safety department here in Iowa, and I went up to Mason City to see him. His brothers and sisters got together, made sure that he was taken care of, made sure that he had a lawyer, because we're not under workman's comp. We're under a system called the Federal Employees Liability Act. So there's quite a few legal hoops that we have to jump through. His brothers and sisters made sure that he was taken care of. So what eventually happened is one of the regulatory agencies, the Federal Railroad Administration, came in to talk to him, and they are not exactly friendly to workers. The rail carriers tried to make it seem like it was his fault, and I advised his legal team not to let him talk to the Federal Railroad Administration, and they were not happy with me. So they wrote up a report where they made it seem like it was his fault. Unfortunately for them, there was a handbook that showed that they had to actually make sure that walkways and tracks were clear, so he should have never been knocked off that car. So his legal team was able to make hay with that. We were able to embarrass the FRA in that instance, but this is kind of like what happened with Dr. King when he was down with the Memphis sanitation strike, where he eventually was assassinated. He got there after 2 people were killed, but he wanted justice for everybody that was left. It's the same thing here. We wanted to make sure that this guy that was one of our union brothers got justice. He eventually did. He's well taken care of for the rest of his life. We need people like Bernie in office to make sure that laws like the Federal Employees Liability Act aren't watered down, because the rail carriers, every year they try to get into this thing. And we need somebody like Bernie to babysit with the Federal Railroad Administration to make sure they go after safety, and they're not just there to represent the rail carriers' interests.
That's right. And essentially, the reason that he was able to win that is because there had been a negotiated contract around those safety agreements, which had to be therefore enforced because of the union, right?
Yeah, that's correct. The handbook was created with the help of the union and the rail carriers. And of course, the rail carriers, they don't want to follow that stuff when it's not in their best interest.
Yeah.
But with the union, we were able to force them to do it.
That's right. That's right. Thanks, Jeff. Nick, let's turn to you. Nick, you are the Iowa State Director of the League of United Latin Americans, or LULAC, and you have been a fierce warrior for voting rights. Yeah, give it up for Nick. Nick, whenever I tell somebody that in the last caucus in 2016, it's estimated that less than 3,000 Latinos participated. Folks are shocked. And you've been helping register thousands of Latinos and Latinas here in Iowa to vote, and also now you're urging them to caucus for Bernie Sanders. So tell us a little bit, why do you believe Senator Sanders is so popular among your community, and what do we need to do to make sure Latinos and Latinas exercise their political power this year and every year moving forward?
Thank you, Misty. My name's Nick, and I am the State Director for LULAC. Believe it or not, we do have Latinos and Latinas here in the state of Iowa. Outside the state of Iowa, a lot of people think that rural Iowa, they think about white, older farmers. But the reality is we have massive, huge Latino populations across the state of Iowa. From Muscatine to Des Moines to Denison, Storm Lake, Sioux City, some of these communities are either almost the majority or are the majority of the community here in the state of Iowa. And so while our community may look small in comparison to the rest of the state, it is big enough to make a significant impact in the caucuses and the general election in 2020. Every 30 seconds, a Latino turns eligible to vote, and we are going to be the largest non-white minority voting bloc going into the 2020 elections. And what we have been doing since last year, we launched a ambitious civic engagement campaign. We want to register Latinos to vote. We want to train them how to caucus, because we all know it's confusing. And we want to make sure they're informed. In communities across the state, depending on how big the community is, we're registering thousands. And across the state of Iowa, our goal is to, and we are going to register 10,000 new Latinos in the state of Iowa. And while they're registered, we want to make sure they know how to caucus. So we're having mock caucuses in English, we're having them in Spanish. In addition, we've established satellite caucuses across the state of Iowa where we have large Latino populations where they can go to these caucuses and do the caucus in their native language and be in a familiar setting that they're used to. And these same communities where we have 15, 20% Latino, they will have their voices heard in the caucuses come to February 3rd. And many of the issues are really the same in the Latino community as far as the rest of the country. Our biggest issues are education, immigration, healthcare, housing. And we need policies that aren't incremental. We don't need no piecemeal. We need change right now, which is why I am going to caucus for Senator Sanders on February 3rd. We don't have time, and then Senator Sanders, he doesn't just go around the state of Iowa or across the country just talking, saying stuff that we want to hear. He's going into the communities of Iowa, talking to the people in the communities about the issues that matter to us. And when I think about these issues, and we're up against President Trump, an aggressive right-wing agenda, we need an agenda that's bold enough to take on the issues that we are facing now. And Senator Sanders is the only candidate who has the boldest ideas, from healthcare to immigration. And right now, Latinos in the state of Iowa, we have the power and the opportunity to transform our country into the country that it can and should be. Thank you.
Thank you, Nick. I just wanted to say a little bit more about this because I think it's so important. One of the things that we know for sure is we're not going to defeat Donald Trump with money, right? The only way we're going to defeat Donald Trump in this election is with people. And to us in this campaign, since the very beginning, and you hear Senator Sanders talk about that all the time, that means not only do we need to change what the electorate looks like, but we got to expand the electorate. We got to get people politically engaged who've been left out, people who have become apathetic or feel like the establishment essentially has left them behind. And that means we have to meet voters where they're at. And the reason I wanted to bring this up just for a little bit of discussion is because our campaign has been relentless about trying to do that. And what does that look like? So so, just this last weekend on Saturday night here in Des Moines, we had a futsal tournament where we had, it was organized by a guy here in town named Luis, who's a mechanic. And basically we put together a tournament of soccer, and we had 2 Bosnian teams, we had 4 Latino teams, we had teams from the AAPI community, and everybody was there, over 150 people playing football with their friends and family, talking about going to caucus for Bernie Sanders. And not only that, but we actually took the opportunity to engage people at that during that time and did like a 15-minute caucus training. We did a caucus training in 4 different languages. So when we talk about meeting voters where they're at, we are walking the walk. And that's because of people on the stage and people like Nick Salazar, who's been helping us think creatively about how do we move from this transactional form of doing politics to moving to what I like to call transformational organizing, community building, right? And so anyways, thank you, Nick. I really appreciate your leadership. And Nick is helping to continue to organize satellite caucuses this year. I'll take a few minutes to talk about that. If you don't know what that is, essentially it's an additional caucus location that you had to apply for. Some of them are happening in more culturally relevant places, for example, mosques or other places across the state. And Nick, you applied for one in Muscatine. Do you want to tell us just really quickly where that's at and how people can participate?
Yeah, so we have a satellite caucus in Muscatine. Members of the community will be able to come in and do the entire caucus in their own native language, be in a familiar setting that they're comfortable with, and have their voices heard on February 3rd. And this is not the only one, but there are a few others across the state that are established around the cultural relevance of the community.
So check those out on the Iowa Democratic Party website, but also talk to your local organizer if you're interested in those. Okay, let's keep it moving. So Supervisor Chris Schwartz, you are the chair of the Board of Supervisors in Black Hawk County, a progressive champion and the first openly gay elected official in northeastern Iowa. Give it up for Supervisor Schwartz. With the excellent tie. Chris, you are the state director for Americans for Democratic Action, an organization that was founded by Eleanor and Franklin Roosevelt. Do you see connections from the work that FDR led during his time to what we are trying to accomplish through our campaign and through the leadership of Senator Sanders?
Absolutely. Thank you, Misty. So the last dying will and testament of FDR, I think you can consider the Economic Bill of Rights. What was in that Economic Bill of Rights? That unfortunately never made it to Congress, the right to housing, the right to a job with dignity, the right to health care, the right to education, the right to food. These are the things that enshrined the founding of Americans for Democratic Action that we worked on to carry that legacy on ever since. And like ADA, Bernie Sanders has been a part of every major social movement of his lifetime. And so when I was a young queer kid growing up in Dubuque, getting bloodied and beat up at school for trying to live my true self, it was Bernie Sanders who was in Congress voting no against Don't Ask, Don't Tell, voting no against the Defense of Marriage Act. Then when I was a college student organizing against the war in Iraq, organizing buses and walkouts and rallies and marches, it was Bernie Sanders that was with us, that was with the peace movement saying, no, we can't do this war. This would be a disaster. And when I saw my town, my hometown of Dubuque, and later my home of Waterloo, when I saw the jobs leaving and the manufacturing base leaving because of NAFTA and disastrous trade policies, it was Bernie Sanders that had the courage and the foresight to vote no on NAFTA, vote no on the FTP, vote no on the TPP. And so we see over and over and again every social movement issue that has come to us in his lifetime. Bernie Sanders has been there, and you can't fake showing up for 40 years. You can't fake it. You can't fake getting the 10 most consequential votes of his lifetime where he got it right, and quite frankly, Joe Biden got it wrong. And this happened over and over and over again. And so we can't be fooled. We can't be fooled. I look at the problems in my neighborhood. I look at the problems in the people that I serve. I look at the problems in my family. Incrementalism is not going to change their lives. We are in a crisis mode. And so when I look at the water quality work that I work on, we've got the plans. We know what needs to be done, but we need the infrastructure. Only Bernie Sanders and the Green New Deal can be trusted on that infrastructure. And so it is clear, it couldn't be clearer that the time for big, massive action is now, and the incrementalism is not going to work. And so it's time for Sanders.
All right, Supervisor Shorts, in with the fire. Supervisor, tell us a little bit about your political journey. One of the things that I think has been so inspiring about Senator Sanders is that he has encouraged people from all walks of life to see themselves as agents of change and to sort of lock away this idea that you have to be the most educated, the smartest, the whitest, in many examples, person in the room to run for office. But no, you can be an everyday person with all sorts of life experiences, because that's what we truly need in leadership. And one of the things that I found interesting as the state director is so many of the local elected officials who have endorsed this campaign ran because of Bernie Sanders. So many people, exactly. And so many people who we are aspiring to today, like Representative Ocasio-Cortez, also found the reason to run because of the movement and because of the energy that Senator Sanders was putting into the world on many of the things you just mentioned. So talk to us a little bit. How did you get involved with politics, and why did you decide to run for supervisor?
Well, I got started at a young age, thankfully, to my parents and a great Franciscan nun who was my teacher, Sister Mary Lee Cox in Dubuque. At that time, it was my sixth grade year. Dubuque had been terrorized by a series of cross burnings. The city, if you remember that part of our history. One of them happened in my neighborhood. This Sister Mary Lee organized a peace vigil at the site of it, and my mom took us all down to it. And that's when I say I got hooked into the social justice movement. But it took a long time until then before I could see myself, a gay person, being a viable political candidate. And it's finally in 2015, I was excited. I got involved with the Sanders campaign as early as 2014 with his first tour to the state. And I'm like, man, this guy's real. This is real. He's building something. He's touched on a moment here in America. And I'm going to jump into this. So I ran for city council. 2015 came up a little bit short. But I said, what would Bernie do? I'm going to do what Bernie did over and over again. You lose, you run again. And that's how Bernie got into the office in his early days. And so I ran immediately for supervisor. And it was tough because I knew that there was going to be a lot of hatred thrown at us because we weren't going to hide the fact that I was a gay person. Because part of it is I wanted to uplift all those middle school and high school kids out there that are depressed and facing suicide and say that it doesn't have to be that way. You can get somewhere in your life. And so I ran, and that was thrown back at us a lot, but we had the direct support of Bernie Sanders in my race. No other national politician. When we became the subject of a hate crime, no other national politician reached out to us. But we had the support of our revolution. We had the support of Senator Sanders because he walks the walk and he talks the talk. He gets it done, and he's a agent of change like no other that we've seen.
Thank you. Thank you, Supervisor. All right, Barb Calva, you are the former president of Iowa Citizens for Community Improvement, a retired nurse. Yes, give it up for Iowa CCI in the house. A retired nurse and a fourth-generation farmer from Adair County. Barb and I go way back. I met Barb when I became a baby organizer. I actually cut my teeth in organizing with Iowa CCI. Thanks. So, Barb, CCI is one of the maybe folks don't know this, CCI is one of the longest standing grassroots organizing groups in the country. They've been organizing relentlessly around environmental issues, cleaning up what we have, some of the dirtiest water in the country, and taking on the powers that be. Bernie and CCI have both been at the damn thing since the 1970s. So where does that staying power come from, and how can we make sure that we continue to create an inclusive, diverse, compassionate movement that lasts for the next 50 years as we embark on this new road together?
Well, the thing that Bernie Sanders has in common with Iowa CCI is the belief that what's right is right and what's wrong is wrong. And if it's wrong, we're going to do something about it. So the way Iowa CCI works is that if your community has a problem and you go to some of the staff like Misty at Iowa CCI and you say, hey, this is going on in my community, what can we do? CCI doesn't go there and do it for you, fix it for you. They show individual people how to step up, how to move forward, and how to make change. And so they empower that community. So the importance of that is that when that community becomes empowered and they can make that change, let's say for $15 an hour at the place they work, and that change is done, then they feel empowered, but they also think, well, what about the guy down the street that has to live by a bunch of trash? What can we do about that? And so they then step forward and help that person and that community. Well, what about the guy up in northern Iowa that has to live by rivers and lakes that are impaired now, and they can't go fishing, they can't go swimming? That group of people now steps up and says, what can I do to help that guy? And so that shows you that what Bernie believes and what Iowa's CCI believes, and the thing that's going to make change for everybody is it's all about us, not me. So what we have to do when we see a struggle in a different community, or a struggle that, hey, well, it doesn't affect me, I hope it goes away, you know, good luck to those people, is to step up, say something, and what can I do? What can I do to help that person? And when we do that, more and more communities are helping each other, and that's how we make change. A lot of times it isn't like a big explosion that makes change, it's that drip, 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 that push, 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 that going to the legislature every year and lobbying about clean water and some of the other issues that are so important to all of us. We do it because we need to do it, not just for ourselves, but for everybody else.
Thank you, Barb.
And that's why Bernie does the things that he does. He doesn't do it for himself. He does it for everybody else, and that's us.
Barb, I'm going to push a little further because I know you so well. So, you know, there's a lot of folks in the room. I mean, we're in Des Moines right now. You know, one of the things I feel like is easy to forget about if you're not living in rural Iowa is what it's like to live next to a factory farm, or what vertical integration has done to our farming communities and rural communities. Can you just kind of like catch people up? What is going on in rural Iowa right now in terms of farming and our water crisis? Why do we have so many impaired waterways?
Okay, I joined Iowa CCI in 2002, so that's been, 18 years ago. There were 212 impaired waterways in the state of Iowa then. There were around 5,000 factory farms on the land, mostly up north. Today, there's 757 impaired waterways in the state of Iowa. One of those waterways feeds the Des Moines Water Works, for those of you who turn a faucet on every day here, or those of you who pay a water bill here. So that is what's happening. Agriculture is not being regulated like an industry would be. The other thing about it too is that the great big factory farms that have so many hogs or chickens or whatever all in one place, is they take that ability away from family farms to be able to make money, to haul their hogs to market, because the market is overtaken by the huge corporations. The corporations also hire their own veterinarians, they bring in their own feed, and so that's called a vertical integration. You can see the result of that in the small towns across Iowa as they are drying up. And so I've said often to political people, I've said, we need to bring life back to rural America. Rural America is shrinking. The small towns are all shrinking. And the point of it is do we really want everybody to live in Des Moines, Waterloo, and the Quad Cities? If that's what we want, we're doing a really good job. But if you feel like it's important to have real people out on the farms raising food that is nutritious and being able to make a living at it, then we need to change some things. Bernie Sanders is aware of that. Bernie Sanders has seen what's happening in rural America, and he's going to make a difference if he becomes president of the United States.
Thank you, Barb. Thank you. All right. Going to turn it over to my dear friend, Supervisor Stacey Walker. You are the first person of color and the youngest elected to the Lynn County Board of Supervisors. Yes, you've been called a fast-rising star in the Democratic Party, and you were our first announced state co-chair. And in all transparency, Stacey and I go way back in organizing together, and we also have a podcast together. So we've known each other for a little bit. So Stacey, kind of to round up this discussion, what do you think it is about Senator Sanders that attracts so many people of all racial and ethnic backgrounds, especially young people, to this movement? And what has made you personally decide to work so hard crisscrossing the state to help make Bernie Sanders the nominee?
Thank you for the question. And thank you to our state director, Misty Rebick, doing a fantastic job, running one of the best presidential campaigns I've ever been a part of, ever seen. So the question was loosely, what has drawn me to Senator Sanders, and how is he able to put together, if you look around, a diverse, multi-generational, multiracial coalition? What is it that's attracting all of you to the senator? One of the things the senator said today at the Black and Brown Forum was that part of his theory of change is bringing new people into the political process. That was my theory of change when I ran in 2016 as well. I knew that as a progressive, a very, very progressive black man in eastern Iowa, one of the ways I was going to have to work to get elected was to activate parts of the electorate that hadn't had much of a reason to go out and participate in local politics before. So we had to speak directly to them. And many of you attended events with Brother Cornel West, who is out here stumping for Bernie Sanders. I'm going to cheat a little bit because he got a similar question, and this is what he said. This is what he said. For far too long, black and brown people, poor people, folks in the LGBTQ community, women, folks who have not had a seat at the table where decisions about their lives and their communities are made, they have not had entree into politics. And that's what he also said. Catastrophe has been visited on those people. When you think about, I think about myself as an African American man. The unemployment rate here in the state of Iowa for African Americans is 3 times as high as it is for anybody else. I am 10 times more likely to be arrested and prosecuted for committing the same crimes as other white folks. And the leading cause of death for African Americans between the age of 15 and 44 in this state is homicide and interactions with law enforcement. That is catastrophe being visited on a group of people. And when you have that, when you have catastrophe being visited upon you, you do not have time for other candidates telling you, we've got to take our time finding the solutions. You've heard it said before, incrementalism isn't going to work for us. When you've got a planet that is overheating and we are pumping harmful gases into the atmosphere, we don't have time for people who say, we can tinker with the system a little bit. Or we don't have time for people who don't even believe that a Green New Deal is possible. We don't have time for that. So when I am asked what attracts me to Senator Sanders, it is the simple fact that he is the only candidate willing to speak to the pressing and urgent needs of myself, of my people, and many of my constituents, and millions of Americans who don't have time for a gradualist approach to change. And so don't just take my word for it. I'm serious. Like, look around this room. You know when you go to a campaign event that you are at a Bernie Sanders campaign event, because look at who shows up. It's people who have traditionally been locked out of politics. It's people who haven't felt like their voice has mattered. It's black people, it's brown people, it's Arab, it's Muslim, it's Jews. It's everybody who have finally found a candidate that speaks directly to them and understands the urgency of our time. And if that isn't convincing enough, you look to the future leaders of this Democratic Party, the Squad.
Yes.
You look at who they've decided to endorse. You look to who progressive leaders like Representative Pramila Jayapal has decided to endorse, because Bernie Sanders has a vision for the future. That's inclusive, an inclusive vision for the future.
Awesome. Okay. Just to close up really quick, on this important day where we are recognizing the legacy of Dr. King, I just want to ask the panel, what does this day mean in times like this? I mean, Stacey, you just sort of commented on it. We don't have the time, right? But I just wanted to take a moment to ground ourselves. We're about to get into a really energetic program. To ask that question. Is there anything you want to share? Like, what does this day mean in this moment right now when we have one of the most racist, xenophobic, homophobic presidents in history? How can we take this day and what it means and push us to the next level?
I've got thoughts. My colleagues.
Go for it, Stacey. Go for it.
Okay. I will try to be succinct because I know we are running out of time. But I will say this. Usually once a year around about this time, we log on to Facebook, we get on Twitter, and we read these glowing endorsements of Dr. Martin Luther King and how awesome he was, and he was an awesome human being. But we forget that when he lived, that's not how America felt about him. And I'll tell you why. I'll tell you why America didn't feel this way about Dr. King. It's because Dr. King was termed a radical leftist, because he believed that all people had a stake in achieving prosperity in this country. And he recognized that the current system in place, this is 50-some years ago now, that the current system in place did not work for all people. It especially didn't work for black people, but it also didn't work for white folks. And Dr. Martin Luther King was able to do great things. He was able to desegregate bus systems. He was able to achieve a Voting Rights Act that helped eliminate poll taxes for African Americans. But when he started talking about solidarity between white folks and black folks, and he included the labor movement in his politics, and he started critiquing military adventurism around the world, saying we are dropping bombs on those folks in Vietnam, and we are also dropping bombs on folks here because we are bankrupting our social programs for folks. That's when people decided he had to go, because he was a threat to the established institutions of power. And you ask me how I feel now about the legacy of Dr. King. Well, my friends, we are walking in his legacy hand in hand, because this is his movement.
That's right.
This is the legacy of Dr. King.
All right. On that note, please give it up for our Iowa State co-chairs.
Bernie.
Check 3. Check, check. Check 1, check 2, check 3. Channel 6. Check 1, 2, 3. Check 1, 2, 3. Check, check. How's sound coming through the mult box? No? Easy. Let's go down on music 2. Check 1, check 2 for press. Check on this microphone on the podium mic for the mult box. Keep going, keep going. 1, 2, 3 on the mult box for press. Checking, standing here for light as well. Check 1, 2, 3. Is it coming through on the channels? Check 1, 2. 1, 2, 3. Check 1. All right, good? Okay, great, thank you. Check 1, 2, 3 for far left in the press in the stage left mult grab. Check on wireless green mic. Check 1, 2, 3. Check. Coming in through the monitor. Could I get a little more in the monitor? Check 1, 2, 3. Check 1, 2, 3.
Y'all, this girl is on fire. Yes. Come on, Alicia Keys, do it. Come on. Come on, y'all. Come on, come on. Come on with me, y'all. Come on. This girl is Yeah, girl got to walk on with Alicia Keys, somebody. Oh man, that panel was something else, wasn't it? Woo! Okay, well, it's good to be back in Iowa. Reminds me of being at home in Cleveland, Ohio. Kind of cold. But the hearts are warm. The passions run deep. So Iowa, as we reflect, all of you know that this is the day that our nation recognizes the life and the legacy of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr. And I thought how appropriate it would be to read a quote from his daughter, his baby daughter, Dr. Bernice King. And she put this on Twitter a few days ago. And I want you to let this marinate with you, Iowa. She said, the night before he was assassinated, many wish happy birthday, she puts that in quotes, to a man today that they would have hated then. Come on, somebody. The authentic, comprehensive king makes power uneasy and privileged unhinged. Hello, somebody. Never forget, he's not here to hear happy birthday because he was murdered. Now, Dr. Bernice King spoke a truth that we don't like to deal with in this country, but I am going to elaborate on her truth. When she said that what her father stood for made power uneasy and privileged unhinged. And here we find ourselves in the year of 2020, battling some of the same challenges that the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. stood up against, the challenges and the people that he stood up for, and his contemporaries like Ella Baker and Fannie Lou Hamer and other freedom fighters of that time. The most important point that Dr. Bernice King was making is that we should not be comfortable in waxing poetic about how great her father was when some of the same people in this day would not have supported what he was fighting for and what he was uplifting. Hello, somebody. She said, he makes power uneasy and privilege unhinged. And I started to think about that thing. About who in that same tradition, at this particular moment in time, is calling on the workaday people of this nation from all walks of life and saying to them that you deserve better than what you are getting. The person in the face of power has said to Wall Street, I'm coming for your greed. To the pharmaceutical industry, I'm coming for your greed. To the fossil fuel industry, I'm coming for your greed. To the multi-millionaires and billionaires of this nation, to say to them, you cannot have it all. A person who protested against the war in Vietnam. Hello, somebody. Somebody who voted against the war in Iraq. Hello, somebody. Somebody who got a resolution passed to say that Yemen, no, in this environment, in that Congress, he led those efforts. Hello, somebody. Somebody who believes that we should not make war, but we should bring the leaders of this world together and try to make some peace. Hello, somebody. I think Senator Bernard Sanders makes power uneasy and privilege unhinged. Come on. Dr. King talked about the triplets of evil: racism, materialism, and militarism. Now, we live in a nation, sisters and brothers, where we need the kind of leader that's not going to hedge, that's not going to play games. See, it makes a whole bunch of people feel good, to quote the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. But my question is to you, and my question is for leaders, that it's one thing to talk, but it's another thing to walk the walk. Hello, somebody. Hello, somebody. We got too many people in this state, too many people in this nation, and too many people in this world who are suffering. And we need, as the United States of America, to be a real beacon of hope and to stand up for the downtrodden and the despised in this nation. We need somebody who's not going to equivocate on that, and that person is Senator Bernard Sanders. Racism kills. Materialism They got us thinking that we always got to keep up with the Joneses and that your value is tied into what you drive and what you wear. We have lost our ability to see that your intrinsic value is in who you are, who you love, what you stand up for. Hello, somebody. And then when it comes to militarism, in the 21st century, we don't need leaders who play with going to war. Going to war does not make you strong. Standing up and trying to bring leaders together on the global stage, that is our strength, and that is what Senator Sanders is committed to. We can't play with this thing. So on MLK Day, I just stopped by, a sister just stopped by to remind you that our strength is what it is with each other. That whether we are black or white, whether we are brown, indigenous, whether we're Asian American, whether we are gay or straight, agnostic, atheist, Christian, Muslim, Buddhist, whatever we identify as, our strength is together. And that is why, Iowa, this movement is so important, because Senator Sanders, we are building a multicultural, multiracial, multi-generational, multi-gendered, hello somebody, movement. That's what we're doing. That's what it has to be. And the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. understood that, but because before he was assassinated, he was an assembling poor people from all walks of life, understanding that we rise and we fall together. So we don't need folks who just gonna quote Dr. King. We need folks who gonna live Dr. King. Hello, somebody. Hello, somebody. Dr. King talked about the injustice in a healthcare system. He talked about capitalism run amok. He challenged this country to take a look at what we are doing to the least of these, our sisters and our brothers, and to act in a way that shows that we have love. And speaking of love, Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. said these words, and I am paraphrasing him, but he said that light, he said darkness cannot drive out darkness, only light can. And hate cannot drive out hate, only love can. There is a song in the Christian tradition that says that love lifted me. It is because of the love of this nation that we are assembled here today to support a justice champion who is standing in the ready position because of love. He's saying to this nation that we deserve Medicare for all because of love. He's saying that we should cancel student debt and give relief to the people of this nation because of love. He's saying that we must reform a criminal justice system that is unjust by every stretch of the imagination, that sees black men somehow as more criminal than anybody else, brown sisters and brothers, indigenous sisters and brothers as somehow more criminal than anybody else. He's saying that because of love, I am going to stand up and call this nation out. And not only am I going to call it out, I am going to stand with my vision and say that we can do better, that you deserve better. Iowa, this is what this movement is all about. Love lifted me. It is because of love, and love is strong. Love is not weak. Love confronts. Love lifts. Love speaks truth. And the truth of the matter is, we know better now. And that means we should do better now. And so we will never get another chance quite like this to elect a champion that from his 20s to this moment has been on a journey that I'm not even quite sure that he knew that the Creator was preparing him for. This is our moment to come together and unite as sisters and brothers for what is just, for what is right, and for what is good, and to use our senator as that beacon of hope. Now, he always says that I cannot do this alone. He knows that this is not about me, this is about us. But Iowa, it is you start this thing off. And we got to tell the naysayers that we going to stand up behind, in front of, and beside the champion of justice in this country at this moment, at this time, who is running for president of the United States of America to change this thing. Because of love. Love lifted me. And as one of the leaders in this movement, I can tell you from this space right here that when folks try to say that what the senator is fighting for, what we are fighting for is radical. If you are comfortable and you see skyscrapers out your window, then maybe having health care for all is radical. But if you are among the 89 million people in this country who are either uninsured or underinsured, what Senator Sanders is pushing is not radical, it's right on time. Hello, somebody. Iowa. If you're suffering from dirty water like your sisters and brothers in Michigan and places like Ohio and South Carolina, the Green New Deal is not radical, it's right on time. And if you are a mama and a daddy in this country, and you want to be able to look into the eyes of your babies and say these words to them, that if you want to go to college, you can go to college, and it doesn't matter how much money I make or don't make. What Senator Sanders is pushing, college for all, it's not radical, it's right on time. If you need your prescriptions, whether you are young or seasoned, we all need medication from time to time. And what a sin and a shame it is that the pharmaceutical industry is making money, their total greed, on the backs and the necks of people in this country. So when the senator calls them out and says, not on my watch, what he is saying to the system is, not on my watch will people continue to be denied or will people continue to die. It is not radical, it's right on time. Right on time, baby. Right on time. So this movement is about all of you. And we need you to knock on doors and make phone calls. Now, the choir, we together, we're celebrating, but we need you, Iowa, to make the dominoes fall. We're going to do this thing, and we are going to win, Iowa. Hello, somebody. Oh, no, it's right on time. Love lifted me, and it will lift us. Now, speaking of love, you know, I got the opportunity here because there's a bad sister here with me this evening. And she hails from the great state of Washington. She's an activist. She's a congresswoman. She is a leading voice on Medicare for all. Hello, somebody. How many of y'all know it takes teamwork to make the dream work? Congresswoman Jayapal is working it in the House of Representatives, and Senator Bernard Sanders is working it in the Senate. Hello, somebody. When the Congresswoman was interviewed and she was asked about why she supports Senator Bernard Sanders, she said these words: he has a clarity on policy prescriptions that go right to the heart of what the working class people need. Hello, somebody. Goes to the heart of the matter. About love. So I bring to you Iowa. Now, I know it's a little chilly outside, but it's mighty warm in here. It's burning up in here. Can you give an Iowa welcome? Come on, somebody. To the one and only Congresswoman Pramila Jayapal.
Hello, Iowa! Hello, Iowa! Let me tell you a little secret, Iowa. I am all in for Bernie Sanders. Are you all in for Bernie Sanders? Iowa brothers and sisters. I'm here for the same reasons you are. My sister Nina, she talked about the suffering that is going on across this country. There is too much suffering, too much greed and inequality, too much racism and sexism and xenophobia, too much Trumpism. All of that is expressed through Trumpism that has fallen onto America and is just lingering like that dirty old snow. And maybe you're one of those ones that's suffering. Maybe you are one of the people that cannot afford health care. Maybe you've seen somebody die that you love, somebody you know that can't get prescription drugs or health care for what that ails them. Maybe you are one of those people that's suffering from an enormous burden of student loan debt. Maybe you are suffering from not having a good enough job that pays you what you need to put food on the table and a roof over your head. Maybe you are suffering because of the destruction of our planet and you don't know where we are going to go in this world. Maybe you're suffering from the failure of our institutions and our democracy to stand up for working people instead of the wealthiest few and our corporations. Let me be really, really clear about something. This guy in the White House, his trademark is cruelty. His trademark is cruelty. And I say that as the first member of Congress to go into a federal prison and talk to over 200 mothers and fathers who had been ripped from their children, did not know where they are, and for some of them still don't know where their children are. It ain't right. I say that as a woman who has watched this administration rip away reproductive health care and do everything possible to take away that choice from women like me. That ain't right. I say that as a mother of a beautiful, gender non-conforming kid who deserves every right that you and I do, not to be bullied and called out by hate, but to be loved for who they are. And I say that as an immigrant woman of color, somebody who came to this country when I was 16 years old by myself. My parents made that ultimate sacrifice of sending me across the ocean, putting an ocean between them and their beloved child, because they actually believed in the American dream. They wanted me to have the opportunity that we hear about around the world. And so that is why it is so important for me, for us to do everything we can to make sure that that American dream is real. But I don't want you to be fooled about something, okay? Trump is both a symptom and a cause. He's both a symptom and a cause. Economic insecurity has been building for decades in this country because this system has not been working for working people. And that's been for a long time. But here's the thing. Where we are today is based on a series of choices we made. And that means we can make different choices ahead of us, right? We can turn our nation around, away from cruelty to a sense of humanity and decency, away from me-firstism to a collective belief in our interconnectedness and our humanity, away from greed and scarcity and towards love and generosity. The solutions are right in front of us. And so today, as we honor the life and the legacy of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, and Nina said a lot about Dr. Martin Luther King. He was deeply important to me as an activist and an organizer. And in his I Have a Dream speech, Dr. King said this, and it's just as true then as it is today. He said, "This is no time to engage in the luxury of cooling off or to take the tranquilizing drug of gradualism." the tranquilizing drug of gradualism. Just think about that. I know that people are deeply concerned about the choice that's ahead of us for president, and they should be. The consequences are real, and they are serious. And it may seem more comforting to go small, to do things that maybe don't disrupt the system. But the truth is that is not going to address the systemic problems that are in front of us. We have deep structural inequities in front of us, and we need bold structural change, because if we don't do that, this suffering is going to continue. But even worse than that, we might get somebody into the White House, but if that president is not bold and doesn't really fix the problem of healthcare, the problem of the climate crisis, the problem of racism, all of these things that are in front of us, then we may get another Donald Trump down the road. His name may not be Donald Trump, but we may get another one. And exactly 1 year from today, think about that, Iowa, 1 year from today, America will inaugurate a new president, and what we do between now and then, the way that we organize, the way that we build our movement, the way that we operate is going to mean the difference between 4 more years of Trump or a more hopeful future. And here in Iowa, we got 2 weeks. You got 2 weeks, right? We got 2 weeks, because you are going to lead the Democratic Party with your choice at this incredibly important moment in history. To tell you wholeheartedly that I believe that choice should be Senator Bernie Sanders. Now people have asked me, why Bernie? Tell us why Bernie? Why'd you make that choice? And so let me tell you really clearly, I've spent my life organizing. Okay, I'm an activist and an organizer. I helped to drive the movement for immigration reform across the country. I helped pass the $15 minimum wage in Seattle, the first major city in the country to do that. Way back in 2002, I was out in the streets organizing 50,000 people against the war in Iraq. I led the largest voter registration drive in the history of our state, 23,000 new immigrant citizens to vote. And I believe the next president of the United States has to understand that organizing is at the center of everything. And Bernie Sanders is building that movement and organizing people across this country. Now, here's the other thing about Bernie Sanders. He brings an authenticity and a steadfastness. You know, my relationship with him goes back to 2015. I was a brand new state senator in Washington state, and I became either the first or one of the first elected officials to endorse Bernie back then. And it was because of his authenticity, his steadfastness, his work over years to build the movement and to fight for the change we need. Back in 1993, Bernie Sanders was fighting for a living wage. And of course, when I started running for Congress, I was so proud that I was one of the first 3 candidates that he endorsed for Congress. But here's the thing about Bernie Sanders. The thing about Bernie Sanders is he exemplifies what I think of when I think of progressives. I'm the co-chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus, 40% of the Democratic caucus. We are working to make that bigger with your help. And what I like to say is just what you see in Bernie. Progressives, true progressives, are just the first to the best and the most just idea, and then they build the movement to make that idea real. Is that right? And here's the third reason. Bernie brings a clarity of purpose to his policy proposals. And let's just be very clear on this. Bernie Sanders helped to create the movement for Medicare for all and universal health care across this country. Without Bernie Sanders, there would be no movement for Medicare for all. And as the lead sponsor of the Medicare for All House and the bill in the House, let me tell you this, we have had 4 historic hearings in the House, never before in the House of Representatives. We have over half of the Democratic caucus, and I am so thrilled that Now, endorsing Bernie, I'm going to be the National Health Policy Chair for Bernie Sanders, and together we are going to keep going and building that movement for Medicare for all. Now, let me tell you this. Bernie knows that our organizing cannot be limited just to the people who are already engaged, okay? That's called the myth of the likely voter. Bernie wants to move us past that to the truth of every voter. He wants to get out there, and he wants you to get out there and help bring people in so that they believe again in democracy, and they come back out and they vote and they rock these caucuses. And it's not just the same people, it's new people who believe again that a president is going to stand up for them. That's what Bernie Sanders is ready to do. So we've got 2 weeks left to go in Iowa, and the stakes could not be higher. No pressure. No pressure, except we got a lot of pressure. Stakes could not be higher. This is not theoretical. Real lives are at stake, and so we cannot leave a single door unknocked, a single person not talked to. We can't make a single contact where we don't make it clear what is before us. We can't be tranquilized by gradualists. We can't be anesthetized by polite solutions that may sound enticing but aren't going to fix the problem. We need deep structural change that is led by a movement demanding more and a leader who does not turn away from working people. We need the kind of change that President Bernie Sanders will bring. And so let's paint that vision. Change like universal comprehensive health care for every single person in America. Change like student debt forgiveness and debt cancellation for millions of young people across this country. Change like stronger labor unions and real collective bargaining to check corporate power. Change like progressive foreign policy and saying no more to the military-industrial complex. Change like expanding Social Security and taking care of our elders as they go on in their lives. And change like taking on climate change that puts frontline folks, black and brown folks, and the workers that work in the fossil fuel industries at the front as we tackle and save our planet and our people. President must be courageous enough to say what is true and fight for it always, not just when it's easy or convenient. Our next president must be a leader that reminds us all that there is real power in thinking big and building the movement to enact that change. And our next president must be a leader who understands that the power is in we, the people. And that is why I am here today to joyfully, fully, passionately introduce you to that leader, the next president of the United States of America, Senator Bernie Sanders.
Thank you, Des Moines. Thank you. All right, let me break the bad news. It ain't Bernie, it is all of us together. Let me thank Dickie for their music. Let me thank the great supervisor from Lynn County, Stacy Walker, for all of his great work. Let me thank the owner Longford for her remarks, Jeff Kurtz for the great work he's doing in the legislature and for his support. Nick Salazar is doing a great job for us. Barb Kalber for all of her good work, Chris Schwartz. Let me thank Senator Nina Turner. Senator Turner has been doing some of the most important work that anybody can do. It's something all of us have got to do. She's been all over this country, bringing people, young people, working people, people of color, into the political process, getting them to stand up and fight for justice. Senator Turner, thank you. And let me thank Congresswoman Pramila Jayapal, not only for her support, not only for being here this evening, but for all of the great leadership that she is showing in the United States Congress. Pramila, thank you. Before she was a member of Congress, Pramila was an immigration lawyer. She was an anti-war activist, and as a member of the Congress, she has introduced our companion legislation for Medicare for all in the House. Pramila, thank you so much. As all of you know, this mic is falling. The message of our campaign, which is a very profound message, it's called Us, Not Me. And what that message means, and what Senator Turner and Congresswoman Jayapal were talking about, is that if you look at American history, real change never takes place from the top on down, always from the bottom on up. You know, it is never a president who wakes up in the middle of the night and says, oh, I got a great idea. Women should have the right to vote. Or I have a brilliant idea. I think it's only right that gay people be able to get married. I think that's a wonderful idea. That is not the way history works. That is not the way change takes place. And now, more than ever, we need a mass movement of working people, Black and white and Latino, Asian American, Native American. We need millions of people to stand up, to look around them and to say, you know what? The status quo is not working. We need a government that believes in justice, not greed. And oddly enough, when we talk about us, not me, no one could have predicted it, but as all of you know, tonight I'm going back to DC, and tomorrow I will be in an impeachment trial. How long it lasts, honestly don't know. So I will not be able to be back here in Iowa as much as I would like. We had originally planned a number of town meetings, rallies all over the state. We're going to do the best we can. We have great surrogates. You've heard some of them. We have volunteers out knocking on doors. And thank you very much, volunteers. You've been knocking on a lot of doors. As a matter of fact, you've knocked on hundreds of thousands of doors. So ironically, the us, not me, is becoming very much of a reality in the last 2 weeks of this campaign, because I'm not going to be able to be here as much as I would like. So you guys are going to have to carry the ball. And that means talking to as many of your friends and family and coworkers as you can, making sure they all come out to caucus 2 weeks from tonight. Second point that I want to make is there is a lot of appropriate discussion about electability. You got people all across the political spectrum who say, we have got to defeat the most dangerous president in the modern history of this country. We agree. We agree. Donald Trump, and no matter what your political views may be, I do understand that not everybody in Iowa agree with everything that we believe. Got it. But I think the overwhelming majority of people in this great state, no matter what your political view may be, do not think it's appropriate that we have somebody in the White House who is a pathological liar. You know, you want to be able to turn on the TV with your kids and not be embarrassed to have to rush and turn off the television because of some absurd remark that the president makes. We can disagree on issues, but we do not want a president who is, gives me no pleasure to tell you, a racist, a sexist, a homophobe, a xenophobe, and a religious bigot. That is not the temperament of somebody we need in the White House. So I happen to believe there are other good candidates out there, and you have heard everybody, I think, say that no matter who wins this Democratic primary process, and needless to say, I kind of hope it is us, but that we will be united in doing everything possible to defeat Donald Trump. So why do I think that we are the best campaign to do that? And let me tell you why. Donald Trump will be a very tough opponent. That's the simple truth. The only way that Trump is going to be defeated is if we have, by far, the largest voter turnout in American history. That's what we need. So I would hope the people of Iowa, the people of America, ask themselves, which campaign is the campaign of energy and excitement? Which is the campaign that is reaching out to working class people, many of whom are disillusioned with the political process and too often do not vote? Young people today, and this is very good news, are the most progressive generation in the history of the United States of America. Historically, however, the simple truth is that young people have not voted at the kind of rate that they should have. Which campaign is capable of bringing in millions of young people into the political process? Which campaign has already won the support, not only of the Sunrise Movement, but of People's Action, of other grassroots organizations who represent millions of people? Our campaign has. You know, historically in American politics, what politics was about is an establishment candidate sits down with a bunch of wealthy people and they map out a campaign. That's the way it was not so many years ago. We have changed the rules of the game. We are not here to represent the political establishment or the economic establishment of America. We are here to represent the working class of America. And one one reason why we are best suited, best prepared to win this election, as you can see in terms of how we raise our campaign funds. You got candidates out there who raise a lot of money from many, many billionaires. Well, we do it differently. We have received over 5 million contributions from over 1.3 million Americans, averaging $18.50. No campaign in American history has done that at this point in an election. So the reason that we are going to beat Trump is we are redefining what politics is about. We don't go to rich people's homes to raise money. We don't go to donors to get support. Our support comes from the working class of this country, and that is something Trump will never be able to defeat. Today we celebrate the birthday of one of the great leaders in American history, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And I will date myself a little bit by telling you that when Dr. King gave his famous speech, I Have a Dream speech, I was actually there. Took a bus from Chicago. And Dr. King and his vision has always been an inspiration to me, one of the motivating political forces in my life. Now, sometimes the media kind of sanitizes what Dr. King was about. But I want all of you to know that he was a man not only of brilliance and a great writer and a great orator, he was a political revolutionary. And during his lifetime, he took on not only the racists in Alabama and Mississippi, you all know that, and went to jail and was beaten and all that, but he took on the economic establishment. He took on the military-industrial complex. At great personal sacrifice, he said, you know what, the three major evils in American society are racism, are poverty, and militarism. And with great courage, he stood up and opposed the war in Vietnam. And he said at that time, a lesson which is relevant today: why are we spending huge amounts of money fighting wars when people in America are sleeping out on the streets? So in the spirit of Dr. King, what this campaign is about, what makes us different than other campaigns, is that we are not here just to defeat Donald Trump. And of course, that is our first goal. But we are here to transform the United States of America and create an economy and a government that works for all of us, not just the 1%. And that is what the political revolution is. It says that we need millions of people to step up to the plate, to stand up and fight for justice. Now, what is our program about? What does it mean? It means, for a start, in America, the wealthiest country in the history of the world, we are going to end the grotesque level of income and wealth inequality that exists today. We will not accept 3 people owning more wealth than the bottom half of American society. We will not accept the top 1% owning more wealth than the bottom 92%. I have been all over this great state, and I have talked to workers here in Iowa. I remember a woman right here in Des Moines. She raising 3 kids, making $10.25 an hour working at a fast food place. Well, you know what? You can't raise a family on $10.25 an hour. So what we believe is in America, if you work 40 hours a week, you should not be living in poverty. It's not a radical idea. And that means that we're going to raise the federal minimum wage to at least $15 an hour. It means that we're going to do away with the absurdity of women making 79 cents on the dollar compared to men. Women deserve the whole damn dollar. It means that we're going to make it easier for workers to join unions and engage in collective bargaining. It means that we're going to rebuild our crumbling infrastructure, our roads and our bridges and our water systems and our wastewater plants, and we're going to build 10 million units of affordable housing. And when we do that, when we rebuild our infrastructure, we're going to put millions of workers into jobs that will pay them good union wages. And when we talk about creating a government of the working class, for the working class, by the working class, it means that we're going to fundamentally change the way we do education in America. We are going to have high quality, affordable, universal child care in America. Thank you. And when we talk about education, I want to just say this, because what our campaign urges people to do is to think outside of the box. Look at the world we exist in a different way than Congress does or that the media does. And ask yourself, in terms of education, everybody here knows there is no debate that to make it into the middle class today, by and large, sensible that with a changing world economy, changing technology, that when we talk about education, what that must mean is free tuition at public colleges and universities throughout this country. Financial distress because they went to college. Yeah. Now, if we could bail out the crooks on Wall Street, if we could give $1 trillion in tax breaks to the top 1% and large corporations, do you know what a government that represents working people can do? We can cancel all student debt in America. And we do that with a modest tax on Wall Street speculation. Talk about education and changing our values as Americans, it means that we must respect those people who educate our young people. We must make sure that the best and the brightest in this country want to go into education. Say with pride, man, I am so excited. I am going to become a teacher and influence the lives of thousands of young people. And to do that, we have got to make sure that all teachers in America earn at least $60,000 a year. There is an issue that I have been talking about my entire adult life. And that issue is a profound belief that health care is a human right, not a right. Now, in America, we are spending twice as much per person on health care as do the people of any other country. Spending twice as much. And here's what you are getting for spending $11,000 for every man, woman, and child. We are ending up with 87 million Americans who are uninsured or underinsured. That ain't right. We are ending up with 30,000 people dying each. 30,000 people dying each year because they don't get to a doctor when they should. And I want you to hear this as well. In our system today, despite spending twice as much per capita as the people of any other country, 500,000 people go bankrupt as a result of medically related debt. I want you to think about it. People come down with cancer. They're struggling for their lives. Through no fault of their own. They're dealing with cancer. They're dealing with heart disease. They're dealing with Alzheimer's, whatever terrible illness they may be. It is unthinkable that in the wealthiest country in the history of the world, hundreds of thousands of people suffer severe financial distress simply because they are struggling with some terrible illness. That is not acceptable, and together we are going to end that absurdity. Now here is the simple truth. Some of you are saying, how is it that we are the only major country on earth not to guarantee health care to all people? How is it that we spend twice as much per capita on health care as do the people of any other country? How is it that we pay by far the highest prices in the world for prescription drugs? How does it happen? And the answer is not complicated. The answer is that the healthcare industry, the drug companies, and the insurance companies will do everything they can to prevent us from moving to healthcare as a human right. And tonight I got news for the greed and corruption of the healthcare industry. For over 100 years, from Teddy Roosevelt to Barack Obama, presidents have been talking about the need to guarantee health care to all people. within the first week of our administration, we will introduce and we will finally pass a Medicare for all single-payer system. And what that means is no more premiums, no more co-payments, no more deductibles, no more out-of-pocket expenses, no more than $200 a year for prescription drugs. And we're going to expand Medicare to include dental care, hearing aids, eyeglasses, and home health care. And because we end the corruption in the pharmaceutical industry, where in some cases we pay 10 times more for the same medicine sold in Canada. Because we end the profiteering of the healthcare industry that made $100 billion in profits last year. Because we end the administrative nightmare of a system in which thousands of different private health insurance plans exist. Because we will have a simple system that provides comprehensive care to every man, woman, and child, we can make certain that the working people of this country will pay substantially less for health care than they are today. And I gotta tell you something just happened today, which is really monumental in this whole struggle. Pramila, who, as I mentioned earlier, introduced the legislation in the House. I've introduced the Senate. You know, we've got a bunch of people running around the country talking about the need for Medicare for all. Well, today I am happy to tell you that the American College of Physicians, representing 159 doctors, has come out for Medicare for all. And they understand, and the nurses, we have the support, as many of you know, of the National Nurses United. That's the largest nurses union in America. And what the nurses understand and what the doctors understand is they cannot do their jobs under the current system. Doctors are sick and tired of fighting with the insurance industry about what kind of medicine, what kind of therapy they can prescribe to their patients. They are sick and tired of seeing people walk into their office much sicker than they should be because they didn't have any health insurance and couldn't afford to go to the doctor. So what the doctors are saying and what the nurses are saying, let us practice the medicine we were trained to do. Healthcare is a human right for every man, woman, and child. Go to the doctor when you need to, regardless of what. Donald Trump embarrasses us every day. Hard to keep track of what his latest tweet was. Probably about me, but anyway. But one area where his absurd policies impact not only us as Americans, but the entire world, is his ignorance in terms of the crisis of climate change. So let me lay it on the line here. What I'm going to tell you, I wish it's kind of frightening stuff. And what it's about is that the scientists who have for a long time told us that healthcare, that climate change is real, that it is caused by human activity, that it's already doing a lot of damage, this is what they're now saying. What the scientists are now saying is, hey, sorry, we underestimated the degree and the severity and the speed in which climate change is ravaging this country and our planet. Polar ice caps are melting at a faster rate than they had anticipated. The ocean is warming at a faster rate than they had anticipated. The earth is warming at a faster rate than they had thought. which means that by the end of the century, this planet may be 7, 8 degrees Fahrenheit warmer than it is. And what that means, if we do not address this existential crisis, is that cities in America like Miami, New Orleans, Charleston, New York City, and many others will be partially or maybe substantially underwater by the end of the century. It means that countries like Vietnam and Bangladesh and large parts of China will be significantly underwater. It means that we will see increased droughts, which means that farmers here in Iowa will have a shorter, less productive growing season. They will be producing less, and the quality of the food they produce will deteriorate. And when you have more drought, you're going to have more wildfires. All of you are aware of the horror now taking place in Australia, where that continent is burning, and what happened in California with unprecedented levels of forest fires. If we don't get a handle on this, that is the future of this world. And when we talk about the acidification and warming of the ocean, we're talking about fish dying off, but tens of millions of people get their protein from fish. When we talk about extreme weather disturbances, just a few months ago, Venice, Italy, one of the most beautiful cities in the world, underwater. Houston, Texas, underwater. That will happen more and more frequently at a huge expense of taxpayer dollars having to rebuild what has been destroyed. When you're talking about climate change, you're talking about bacteria thriving in warm weather, disease spreading. When you're talking about climate change, the United Nations tells us that hundreds of millions of people may become climate refugees, forced to leave their homes because there's no water to drink or land to grow their crops. And when millions of people migrate, you're going to have an extraordinary level of international tension and more wars. That is what we face. Well, as president, we're not going to ignore this issue. We are going to deal with it forcefully. And I am proud to tell you that we have introduced the most sweeping and comprehensive climate change proposal ever introduced by any candidate for federal office. This proposal is based on the outline of the Green New Deal. And what it says, that we will no longer allow the fossil fuel industry to put their short-term profits ahead of the future of our planet. And what it says is that we can create up to 20 million good-paying jobs, transforming our energy system away from fossil fuel to energy efficiency and sustainable energies. Now, the difficulty here, and I'm trying to be honest with you, this is a really serious threat. And the difficulty here is that even if we in the United States did the right thing and transformed our own energy system, took on the fossil fuel industry here, that still would not be enough. What we need, and what I will do if elected president, is reach out to people all over the world, in China, in Russia, in India, Pakistan, and Brazil, all over the world, because we are in this together. And to make the case that maybe, just maybe, instead of spending $1.8 trillion a year on weapons of destruction designed to kill each other, maybe we pool our resources, come together, and fight our common enemy, which is climate change. This is a profound, this is more than an environmental issue. This is a moral issue. And the issue is, Will we leave our children and our grandchildren and future generations a planet that is healthy and habitable, or will we not? And I don't want anybody here, 30 years from now, 50 years from now, to be talking to your grandson or your granddaughter and answering the question, Grandma, Grandpa, why didn't you do something when you knew what was going to happen? Why didn't you listen to the science? Well, I'm here tonight to tell you, we will listen to the scientists, we will act accordingly. When we talk about a progressive agenda and an agenda based on justice, it is imperative that we look at a broken and racist criminal justice system. Again, I want you to think outside of the box. And if you think outside of the box, you're going to ask yourself, how does it happen that in the richest country on earth, we have more people in jail, disproportionately African American and Latino and Native American, more people in jail than any other country on earth. China has 4 times our population. Communist, authoritarian country, we have more people in jail than China does. How does that happen? What we will do as an administration is rethink the entire criminal justice system. And what that means for a start, we will invest in our young people in jobs and in education rather than investing in more jails and incarceration. Second of all, right now, tonight, there are 400,000 people in jail who haven't been convicted of anything. Do you know that? They were arrested, they were charged, they haven't been convicted. Why are they in jail? They can't afford bail. They're arrested, maybe they're guilty, maybe they're not. They can't afford the $500 or $1,000 in bail they need to get out of jail. We, in the year 2020, don't need debtors' prisons in America. So we're going to end the cash bail system. We are going to end private prisons and detention centers. Corporations should not be making money by locking up fellow Americans. And here's something else we're going to do. We are going to end the so-called war on drugs. We are going to legalize marijuana in every state of the union. Here's a question. How many people here know someone who has been arrested for the possession of marijuana? Raise your hand, please. All right. We are going to expunge the records of those who were arrested for possession of marijuana. And when we talk about broken systems in America, we're talking about a very broken and racist immigration system. On our first day in office, we will end the demonization of the undocumented in this country. On our first day in office, we will repeal all of the racist immigration executive orders that Donald Trump promulgated. On our first day in office, we will reestablish legal status for the 1.8 million young people in the DACA program. We will develop a humane border policy which will not allow federal agents to snatch babies from the arms of their mothers or their children. And most important, Donald Trump stops at nothing. And most importantly, I believe we can establish and pass a bipartisan, comprehensive immigration reform legislation. Which will lead toward a path toward citizenship for all of the undocumented. No matter how divided our nation may be, there is an issue that I think brings everybody together. And that is our horror at turning on the TV and hearing about another horrible mass shooting. And people kind of throw up their hands and they you know, it's just hard to understand how and why this continues to happen. So let me simply say that in terms of gun safety, our policies will be determined by the American people, not the NRA. That means universal background checks. That means ending the so-called gun show loophole. Four-man provision. And what the American people have now finally understood, whether rural states like Iowa or Vermont, whether urban areas like Chicago or New York, is that we must end the sale and distribution of assault weapons in America. As a U.S. Senator from Vermont, I am on the floor of the Senate often, hearing my colleagues give speeches. Not exactly one of the most exciting things to do in the world. And very often I hear from my Republican colleagues who are conservative, and they say, you know, we believe in small government. We believe in getting the government off the backs of the American people. I say to those so-called conservatives, if you believe in getting the government off the backs of the American people, please understand that it is women who have the right to control their own bodies, not the government and politics. Nominate anyone to the U.S. Supreme Court or the federal courts who is not 100% pro Roe v. Wade. Last point that I want to make, if the microphone allows it. We are living in unprecedented times. Massive levels of income and wealth inequality. A president who is trying to undermine American democracy. The threat of climate change. A healthcare system which is dysfunctional. The fact that over the last 45 years, the average worker in America has not seen a nickel increase in his or her wages, while the very, very rich get much richer. That's the world that we live in. And what this campaign is asking of all of us is something pretty hard. Yeah, I'm here to ask you to help me win in Iowa. Yeah, I'm here to ask you to help me win the Democratic nomination. I'm here to ask you to defeat the worst president in modern American history. I'm asking all of that. But I'm asking something more. I'm here to tell you what no other presidential candidate will tell you, is that no president, not Bernie Sanders or anybody else, can do it alone. Because here is the truth. You don't see this truth on TV. They're worried about gossip and this or that, but they're not worried about this one. And that is, we have a power structure in America. And I'm talking about the power of Wall Street, who have endless, underlying endless amounts of money. 6 major banks have assets of over $10 trillion. You got that? 6 banks. I'm talking about the insurance companies. I'm talking about the drug companies. I'm talking about the fossil fuel industry. I'm talking about the military-industrial complex, who has helped create a situation where we're now spending more on the military than the next 10 nations combined. I'm talking about the prison industrial complex. I'm talking about the 1% who have fought to make sure that they do not pay their fair share of taxes. That is who we are taking on. That's the simple truth. And I'm not here to tell you, hey, vote for me and I'm gonna do it all. It doesn't work that way. The way it works is that millions of people are gonna stand up, and as president, I will not only be commander-in-chief of the military, I intend to be organizer-in-chief as well. That means I'm prepared to go to Kentucky as president. I'm prepared to come back here to Iowa and to say to the senators and the members of Congress, hey, tell the people in this state why you think health care is not a human right. Tell the people of this state why you want to give tax breaks to billionaires and cut Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. And I think that when you have a president who is willing to confront those senators who continue to represent the rich and the powerful and ignore the needs of working families, when you have a president who will go around the country, you know what? The American people will stand up and tell those senators, do the right thing, represent us, not your campaign contributors. So that is what this campaign is about, and it's kind of unprecedented. I mean, candidates have come and gone for years. They try to win elections, and that's fine. We're trying to win an election, but we're trying to do something more, and that is build a movement of people who are prepared to fight so that finally we have an economy, an energy system, a healthcare system, a government that represents all of us, not just the 1%. I want to thank all of you for coming out here. We need your help now more than ever. I'm going to be stuck in Washington for God knows how long. So we need you to take my place, give 2-hour speeches like I do, do whatever you can do. But let's make sure, Iowa goes first. You have an unprecedented role in American politics. You go first. And if we win here in Iowa, with your help, I believe we can win here in Iowa. I think we're going to win in New Hampshire. And if we win in New Hampshire, we're going to win in Nevada. And if we win in Nevada, we're going to do very well in South Carolina. And we're going to win in California. Four years ago, I came to Des Moines, came to Iowa. And I laid out a series of principles, many of which I've talked about tonight. And the economic establishment and the political establishment and the media establishment, those ideas are very radical. Nobody in America will support them. Well, the people in Iowa did. Iowa started the revolution in Iowa. Let's complete the revolution. Thank you.